Hey everyone, and welcome to this Facebook Live. Today I'm going to just do a little bit of a talk. As you know, we're leading towards a full moon, so what I'm going to talk to you about isn't always just predominantly at a time of a full moon, but it does seem to perpetuate the situation more at a full moon. So, hey Jan, how are you, honey? So I wanted to come in and talk about, are you re-experiencing things from the past? Hey Crystal, how are you, honey? So what I mean by that is usually when we have a full moon, anywhere from 7 to 10 days beforehand, we can start finding that things from our past start coming to the surface. And what can happen is that we usually want to just try and get rid of that as much as possible. So, sorry, I'm just trying to share it across to my page and it's not working, so I'll just turn it off. Hey Belinda, how are you? So as I said, hey Dorinda, when we lead towards a full moon, 7 to 10 days prior to it, we can start noticing things from our past starting to emerge and come back into our conscious mind. And what can happen is we start to think that, oh my God, I have to relive these things. And you hear me talk about this all the time. Hey Shondell. And it's because it does happen for a reason, and I want to be able to share with you some really good tips and to be able to help move through this if this is what's occurring for you. But as I said, just because these things are happening just at a full moon doesn't mean that they're excluded outside of a full moon period, because it will happen at that same time. As I said, I just tend to find that it gets more heightened at this time of the year. So we do have a full moon on this coming Sunday for Australia. Hey Shondell, hey Jan, that's so cool. I'm so pleased this is resonating with you, Jan. So what happens is we get to re-examine things from our past because there's something there that still hasn't been addressed. But what happens is that if there are things that have not been healed or transcended through or transmuted and done the healing work around that, hey Rashika, what happens is we go back in and we re-experience that whole experience on every single level, like how you felt mentally, emotionally, how it affected you spiritually, soulfully, what kind of thoughts were going on, your pain, your fears, your doubts, your anxiety, and all of those kind of things completely reactivate all of your senses when you think about things that are unresolved from the past. So that means that instead of just going back and having a look at them, you're actually almost going back to that time frame and constantly reliving them and feeling everything about that time and space. Hey Elise, how are you, honey? And Bhavana. And that really is the most horrible experience. I'm sorry, I just had a phone call. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is I understand exactly what this feels like on a huge scale. For people who don't know, I had a boat accident, it'd be about 17 or 18 years ago, where I was thrown out of a boat at 80 miles an hour and hit water and survived it. But from that trauma was huge. And every time I thought about that experience, it brought up how I felt after I've been thrown out of the water, the recovery phase, the whole entire 9 to 10 months that it took for me to get back to my normal self. Every time I thought about that boat accident, it wasn't just the accident, it was every single thing that was involved to get back to normal. So of course, naturally, I didn't really want to revisit it very often because it just brought up so much pain and suffering. And I had thought that I had dealt with it on so many different levels. I'd looked at it from a mind perspective, logically try to talk myself through things, but what I wasn't doing was actually going in and doing the healing work to be able to receive the closure around this situation. And that's why I want to be able to talk about this, to be able to help give you some ways, if this is what is occurring for you, to help you to feel really empowered to be able to make different choices rather than constantly being re-experiencing all that pain and suffering over again, because that's a really terrible place to be in. Hey Lorraine, how are you? So what I found from that time experience was that in order to be able to move forward was I had kept that part of myself and that time in my life a very big secret. Other than the few people that were involved, whenever I met anyone, it was not something that was ever brought up or discussed, because obviously every time I shared or even thought about that, it would bring up so much pain, and the last thing I wanted was for anyone new or who knew me to know that it happened, because if they wanted to talk about it, it just brought up so much vulnerability, and it was just almost like just bringing up so much pain. But what I did find was that once I took it from being a secret, it couldn't breed anymore, because when we keep something secret to ourselves, we keep it hidden from the world. And so therefore, when we keep things in the darkness, they continue to feed your fears. They continually feed your anxiety. They feed your doubts. So the number one thing I learned about, rather than re-experiencing it, was to stop making it a secret. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't exactly race around and tell everyone that happened. But what happened was that once I designed the oracle cards, I didn't even 100% transparent. I don't know why I didn't think about it at the time, but when I designed the oracle cards, I had to explain to people why I had created them. What was the driving force behind it? Definitely, Lorraine, can't agree. You can't heal until you get it out. And I knew that logically, but I also, as I said, I didn't want to reveal that vulnerability. So it wasn't until I designed the deck of oracle cards that I actually had to explain what was the driving force behind them, which was when I was so mentally, emotionally, and soulfully broken and shattered from that experience. As oracle cards was one of the things that helped me to be able to heal and to be able to move forward. And they gave me so much guidance and helped me to learn about myself on such a deep soulful level and work through some of those emotions. But again, that was something that I did secretly on my own. And so when I designed the cards, I wanted to be able to help anyone else that was experiencing pain on any level or wanted to learn about themselves. That was the big driving force behind why I created the oracle cards, to be able to help empower people in their journey of life. So which meant that when I went out there to tell people about these oracle cards, I had to share the story. Now I can tell you, when the first time I ever actually had to talk about the accident on a huge scale, I had the sweats. There was so much emotion going on inside my head of not trying to almost talk about it from robot mode. I didn't want anyone to feel into that vulnerability. And I remember the very first time I did it on live, I nearly burst into tears, and that terrified the shit out of me. So that's what I'm saying. The more that you start to discuss what those experiences are with trusted people, you must find people that you truly trust to be able to share these experiences with people, that are going to be there to support you, that are going to be there to give you empathy and compassion and give you a hug if you need to, or even just hold that space while you talk to them. When you have these pain points that you're constantly re-experiencing, which means that you are constantly being brought back to that time and space and reliving all of the emotions and the whole thing over and over again, that by taking it away from it being a secret, it can no longer breed anymore. Okay, so that's the first thing to do if that's what's happening for you. The second was that I found that forgiveness was something that I naturally gave to others, but I did not give to myself freely. So there was a component around being able to understand. I held around that experience, around the boat accident, I held so much anger towards myself. I blamed myself for the whole experience. And so it was not that I was angry at the situation. I wasn't angry about what it took to get back to recover. I wasn't angry about the experience, anything. I was angry at myself, and I held on to that anger for so long that I thought to myself that if I give myself forgiveness, what will happen to all of that anger? Because I'd just become so accustomed to holding on to that anger, and it was slowly destroying me from the inside out. Hey, Ellen, Helen, hey, Tommy, hey, Jake. And so this was a huge key component for the healing process was, as I said, taking it out of it being a secret, but to forgive yourself. Regardless of any situation, there is always a role in which we play. I could have quite easily dealt with it in a completely different way, the boat accident. I could have allowed it to happen, gone through my healing to get myself back on track again and moved forward. But it was myself that held on to that anger. And there was a part about the anger that became a driving force. That anger became a driving force that made me pursue to get myself better. That anger was a driving force to want more from my life. That anger fueled me to, in a lot of ways, that helped me to be where I am today, if I am 100% honest. It was a very big driving force of, once I realized what I was so angry about, I went and did so much research and so much study and invested so much time and money and energy on finding out all of that available information to help me get a better understanding as to certain components about the accident. So what I mean by that is I was angry. I didn't trust my intuition at the magnitude that I do now. So I have invested so much money learning everything about that. I had to go in and do some personal development because my confidence was so shattered. So I did course materials on building confidence and building trust. I then put myself out there and put myself back into courses to not only just have those as information, but to put those into practice and then started up my own business and got myself back up out there again. But that anger that I had from that experience and the anger where I took on all the blame from it, that also became partially a bit of a driving force to how I have come to be where I am today. But what I realized was that anger was, yes, being channeled and fueled and helped me, came a driving force, but there was still a component of that anger that was self-destructive and was slowly destroying my own self. So on one level I was going this way, but on another channel I was slowly just sort of completely self-destructing on the inside. So there was this internal conflict. So I had to be able to make that conscious decision about, isn't it about time you forgive yourself? I always have this motto when I share with my students as well, and you may have heard me say this on Facebook Lives many a times. Whenever you're in a situation, think about what is the advice that you would give to someone else and then give it to yourself, because you can guarantee that you give this wealth of amazing information to other people but don't apply it to yourself. And the very first thing that came to mind was that if I was working with a client, what would I suggest? And that was to forgive themselves. So it took me quite some time to be able to get into that place where I could truly forgive myself. I had to do a lot of inner work. I had to invest a lot of money in doing that inner work to be able to comfortably be able to say in this day and age that I actually do forgive myself. That is so awesome, Helen. I'm so pleased that you've done that inner work. Oh, I'm so pleased, Lorraine. That's just such a beautiful comment. Thank you so much, love. And I'm pleased that I've been able to help you to be able to take steps forward, love. Thank you, Jen. The forgiveness. So I used to, and it's a mantra that I share inside of my students, which I'm going to share with you today. I'll also go back into the blurb that you write above any videos that you put out, and I'll put it in there as well for anyone that wants to do it. And this was something that I had to put on repeat. My mind had become so accustomed to using this anger, but there's always a saying I say, once you know that something is not working for you and you continue to do it, you can no longer pretend or unconsciously unknow what you know. So once I realized that this was actually now moving into a space of self-destruction, I couldn't pretend that it wasn't happening anymore. So the moment that I became aware of I wasn't forgiving myself, I knew that I was making that conscious choice of whether I chose to hold on to that anger or whether I could let that go. So the mantra that I used to go through all the time, I had to write it down, was, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And that would be something that I would play over and over and over in my head. I used to write it and put it on the fridge because sometimes I'd forget and I'd need to put that reminder there. And the moment that I found that anger was fueling that self-destructive element, because it was something that I'd done, that anger I'd held onto for so long, had just become a neurological pathway. The nerves knew inside of my body exactly what to do and to be able to keep me in the space of just re-experiencing all that pain. So I had to interrupt that neurological information that I put in my head and rechannel it to go in a completely different direction. So that was why this was something that, it wasn't just something I said once or twice, it was something that was said over and over, almost like a broken record inside of my freaking head. And I still use that mantra still today when I find if that pattern jumps in where I'm holding on to anger within my own self. So that was a really such a freeing experience. And don't get me wrong, at first when I started saying that, there was a complete resistance. My brain and my body didn't want to accept that I could forgive myself, because in my mind, forgiveness was a weakness. Forgiveness was giving myself permission to be okay with that. And so therefore I really had to do a lot of work around being able to work out it was actually okay. It was an accident, and that it was me that was choosing to continuing to blame myself. That was such a huge realization, and I would remind myself that it was a freak accident. So with that being said, what that did was that gave me the capacity, the more I took it outside of it being a secret, the more that I've learned to forgive myself around that experience, the more now I can talk about that experience, and there are no emotional ties to it in any way, shape or form. I do not relive that situation anymore. Hey, Caitlin. Oh, that's so good. I'm so pleased. Well, yeah, definitely watch it when the video is up, so then you can go back and watch it, especially if this resonates with you. So as I was saying, when you can give yourself those two types of things, take it out of secrecy and forgive yourself, that gives you that closure that you're looking for. So therefore you can move into the space of, rather than re-experiencing shit from the past or re-experiencing that pain, you can actually move into a space where you acknowledge how you felt at that time. But there is no sensory activation because you have changed the neural pathway. And so therefore it is not naturally going back to that outcome. Remember, as I just said, my mind body was so attuned to anger and then taken it to self-destruction that any thought, action, behavior, pattern, emotion that invoked blame, it knew exactly the response to give me, which would take me back to that time and my place in my life. Being able to do those two main steps allowed me to now be able to go back to that time and space, but I am not affected by it in any way, shape or form, because I've done that healing work, I've done that forgiveness, I've been able to let that go, so therefore that gave me the closure. And through the repetition of doing that, I've created a new pathway and the way that my mind and body responds to it, and so therefore my outcome is completely different. Look, I'm going to be 100% transparent here, Helen. At the beginning, when I did repeat the mantra, which is the forgiveness mantra, I didn't believe it. It took time to learn to believe it, but I knew that was only because my brain was accustomed to thinking a particular way. So even if when you say this mantra, everything, like I can tell you there would be times that I would say it and it was almost like I repelled the very thing that I was saying. But I also knew it was the exact thing that I needed. So work through whatever comes up when you go through and repeat this mantra, because you know what? You've probably never, ever, ever said these kinds of words to yourself, so they're going to be new. Your mind, body, and emotional state is going to react so differently to it because that's on that conscious, logical head part of yourself and staying in that human part of ourself. But the soul version of self goes, yeah, this is exactly what we need. So keep doing it, honey. And eventually, what you're hearing and what you're saying to yourself, you are soon going to be able to believe it, and believe it from a level of feeling it into your soul. So if at first when you say this, you may get the same reaction as me, feeling like repelling it, or it's just like, ugh, don't worry about it. The more you keep doing it, the more it will start to flip. And you'll notice that. And for me, this is this amazing defining moment. When you find that, you continue to repeat that mantra, and all of a sudden that repellent feeling or that uncomfortable feeling that comes with saying it, and then all of a sudden one day you actually hear yourself say it and actually embrace it, that is that defining moment that you know that you've actually broken that negative emotional charge to re-experiencing your shit, and you are on your pathway to rebuilding the new. It's powerful, incredibly powerful. So, and you will know that defining moment because it'll go from being a thought, words that you're just saying to yourself, to something that you actually feel. And that is where life starts to change for you. So, as I said, and then this gives you the opportunity to just acknowledge how you felt about those experiences. And this is how we can do this work. Oh, that's so good. Like, I am like so forward in finding those mantras that just help you to step into your power, to help you remind you of your own uniqueness, to remind you of your own potential. And you know what? Everyone has their own particular mantras that just vibe with them. And they're the ones that's come directly from your soul. But some of them take time to really allow them to, depending on how much they've affected you, some of them may take time for you to feel that absolute soul connection to those words. So that's why I always say, never give up at the beginning when it may not feel right, because you've spent so much time thinking about the situation. That's going to take time to desensitize yourself to the re-experiencing past and creating new healthy habits. So the more you put that shit on repeat, the better it is that's for you. And one of the things that I suggest to my students is, if you find a mantra that you absolutely dig, sit there, record it on your phone, and then put it on loop. So when you're going out for a walk, you don't have to always be saying those words. You could actually allow yourself to be in a receptive state of hearing those words being said back to you in your own voice, and do it in a way where you can really try and activate those emotions and those feelings that are attached to the words that you give it. So we're in a time where we are making rapid shifts happen, and we don't need to keep living the old. We can't change our experiences, definitely, but we can learn from them, and we can use them to empower us and move forward. And I can now honestly say that because of those experiences that I had, especially with that boat accident, I'm not sure if I would be here doing what I'm doing now had I not had that experience. Sometimes you need to be able to have, not always, but sometimes some of the worst situations when you can actually give closure to them and find out what your lessons are, become the greatest catalysts that have created the biggest amount of change and transformation in your world. You just have to get to the other end where the pain doesn't hurt you anymore to be able to have that hindsight to look back on it. So I really hope that this Facebook Live, for anyone out there that may be feeling that they're experiencing, reliving, re-experiencing their past, gives you some really cool tips and tricks. Not tips and tricks, but tips on how to be able to give yourself that closure. That if you're listening to this video, then there is a part of you that does want closure, and it just requires time and effort and energy on your behalf. And I really hope that this helps get out to all the people that need to hear this message. So much love to you all. Take care, and remember, be good and be kind to yourself. You should always be your best cheer squad, not the person that self-destructs their own self. We are in a generation and this incredibly amazing collective consciousness where we, instead of always going down into the depths of our soul, we're actually being able to move into our soul and allow that to propel us forward and up and onwards and rise. And it's an exciting, exciting time. So we don't need to stay in those painful points anymore. So I hope this helps. Take care and much love to you all.